TikTok was never just an app. What started as a fun distraction quickly became a lightning rod for controversy, national security threats, and even accusations of espionage. At one point, TikTok stood seconds away from being completely banned in the United States, not by algorithm changes or user backlash, but by presidential order. Behind the catchy dances and viral memes was a digital empire powered by one of the world's most advanced algorithms, backed by a company with direct ties to the Chinese government and funded by some of the most powerful investors on the planet. Politicians, intelligence agencies, and rival tech giants all sounded the alarm. Claiming TikTok wasn't just entertaining kids, it was harvesting data, manipulating content, and acting as a potential Trojan horse. With billions in ad revenue, hundreds of millions of users, and an increasingly global reach, TikTok became too big to ignore. But it also became too dangerous to leave unchecked. In this episode, we uncover the real story behind TikTok's rise, the scandals that almost brought it to its knees, and why so many world powers want it erased. Stay with us, because by the end, you might start asking a terrifying question: did TikTok almost go bankrupt? Or was it never truly free in the first place? TikTok's origin story isn't just about innovation, it's about strategy timing and the quiet construction of a digital empire. In 2016, Chinese tech company ByteDance launched a short-form video app in China called Douyin. It was sleek, fast, and addictive, a perfect blend of entertainment and machine learning. The algorithm didn't just respond to user behavior, it shaped it. Within a year, Douyin had captured the Chinese market, but ByteDance had bigger ambitions. In 2017, they introduced a global version under a new name, TikTok. Initially, growth outside China was slow until ByteDance made a bold, calculated move that would change everything. They acquired Musical.ly, a US-based lip-syncing app with a massive teenage user base, especially in North America. For nearly $1 billion, ByteDance didn't just buy a platform, they bought access to the US market. By merging Musical.ly's users with TikTok's infrastructure and algorithm, ByteDance created a supercharged product with explosive viral potential. The results were immediate. TikTok skyrocketed in popularity, becoming the most downloaded app in multiple countries and dominating Gen Z attention spans. Its short looping videos and finely tuned recommendation engine turned everyday users into viral stars overnight. Celebrities, influencers, and even politicians jumped in, and TikTok's cultural influence became undeniable. The app wasn't just a trend, it was redefining how an entire generation consumed content. Meanwhile, ByteDance rapidly expanded its global operations, opening offices in Los Angeles, London, and Singapore. It hired Western executives to bolster its international image, pouring resources into marketing and creator outreach. But behind the scenes, TikTok's Chinese roots remained firmly intact. Despite its global footprint, TikTok was still owned by ByteDance, a company based in Beijing, and that fact would soon ignite a firestorm. At first, few questioned TikTok's origins. Users were busy scrolling, governments were slow to react, and Silicon Valley dismissed it as a passing fad. But TikTok wasn't just gaining users, it was eroding the dominance of platforms like Instagram, YouTube, and Snapchat. For the first time in years, an outsider, and a Chinese one at that, was beating the American tech giants at their own game. As TikTok's downloads surged and its cultural reach expanded, regulators began to take notice. Behind closed doors, national security officials and lawmakers started asking urgent questions. Who owns TikTok? Where is this data going? And what happens when a foreign government has influence over the most powerful content algorithm on Earth? These questions would soon break into the public spotlight, and TikTok's rise would come with a price. What had started as a playful app had now entered the most dangerous arena of all global politics. While TikTok dazzled users with viral trends and entertainment, a far more complex and unsettling reality was unfolding behind its success, a web of investors' government pressure and quiet power plays that raised serious questions about who truly controls the platform. At the heart of this storm was ByteDance, TikTok's parent company, which had grown into one of the world's most valuable private tech firms. On the surface, ByteDance appeared like any ambitious startup, but beneath that exterior was a company deeply intertwined with the Chinese state and powered by capital from both East and West. Major global investors like Sequoia Capital, General Atlantic, and SoftBank had poured billions into ByteDance, betting on its future dominance. These investments weren't just financial, they gave the company a level of legitimacy and protection in global markets. But legitimacy didn't shield ByteDance from scrutiny. In China, all tech firms must operate under sweeping national security laws, which require them to cooperate with government intelligence agencies when requested. This single legal fact placed every byte of TikTok user data in a gray zone, accessible to a company headquartered in a country where the government can quietly demand compliance. ByteDance pushed back, insisting TikTok operated independently and that its international operations were firewalled from Chinese influence. But insiders told a different story. Leaked documents and whistleblower reports alleged that high-level decisions were often routed through executives in Beijing and that Chinese engineers had master admin access to TikTok's US data up until late 2021. ByteDance denied the allegations, but the damage had begun. As these stories surfaced, questions about content moderation added fuel to the fire. Reports revealed that certain political content was quietly suppressed, particularly anything that criticized China, supported Tibetan independence, or mentioned the Tiananmen Square massacre. LGBT+ creators disabled users, and those deemed unattractive were also allegedly throttled in TikTok's algorithm based on internal moderation guidelines leaked in 2020. TikTok claimed these policies were outdated or taken out of context, but critics weren't convinced. It seemed the app wasn't just curating content, it was curating public perception. The deeper investigators looked, the more they found signs of control that contradicted TikTok's public messaging. For instance, when American lawmakers requested insight into TikTok's data flows, they were met with vague answers and redacted documents. Even TikTok's own employees began to voice concerns. One former senior manager in the US described the corporate structure as an illusion of independence, saying that any meaningful decision ultimately required approval from China-based leadership. ByteDance, feeling the heat, launched Project Texas, a massive initiative to relocate all US user data to Oracle servers, create a separate governance structure, and insulate TikTok's American branch from Chinese influence. They hoped this would quell regulators and restore public trust. But skeptics called it a PR stunt. After all, physical servers can be located anywhere, but real power lies in who controls the code, and that code still originated in Beijing. Meanwhile, new reports emerged that TikTok had tracked journalists' IP addresses in an attempt to find internal leaks, a revelation that destroyed any illusion of neutrality. The company later admitted the surveillance happened, calling it the work of rogue employees who were swiftly fired. But by then, the narrative was cemented. TikTok wasn't just a fun app, it was a potential vector for data harvesting, surveillance, and political manipulation. Its backers ranged from powerful venture capital firms to a state apparatus known for censorship and control. And while TikTok tried to rebrand itself as an independent, apolitical platform, the structure underneath told a far more chilling story. It was a house of mirrors, one where influence moved in the shadows, and transparency was always just out of reach. The political firestorm ignited by TikTok's ownership and data practices didn't stay confined to boardrooms or policy briefings. It exploded onto the world stage, transforming the app into a geopolitical flashpoint. The first domino fell in India. In June 2020, after a violent border clash between Indian and Chinese troops left 20 Indian soldiers dead, the Indian government launched a swift digital retaliation. TikTok, along with 58 other Chinese apps, was banned overnight. The official reason was national security, but the move sent a clear message: Chinese tech companies would no longer be tolerated as neutral players. TikTok lost over 200 million users in an instant, its largest overseas market gone in a flash. The shockwaves were immediate, and they didn't stop at India's borders. In the United States, the Trump administration had already been eyeing TikTok with suspicion. Officials at the White House, the Department of Justice, and the intelligence community raised alarms that the app was collecting massive amounts of data on American citizens' data that under Chinese law could be requisitioned by the Communist Party. In August 2020, President Trump signed an executive order giving ByteDance 45 days to divest TikTok's U.S. operations or face a nationwide ban. It was the first time in modern history that a foreign tech company was given such a direct ultimatum. The proposed solution was a forced sale to an American firm, with Microsoft and Oracle vying for control. But the deal was messy, politically charged, and ultimately fell apart under the Biden administration, which paused the executive order but didn't dismiss the underlying concerns. Instead, the Biden White House launched its own review, signaling that the scrutiny wasn't going away. Meanwhile, the issue reached Congress, where bipartisan lawmakers grilled TikTok executives in a series of highly publicized hearings. The most dramatic came in March 2023, when CEO Shou Chu testified before the House Energy and Commerce Committee. For 5 hours, he was interrogated about TikTok's data, handling its relationship with ByteDance, and whether Chinese engineers still had access to American user information. Chu insisted that TikTok operated independently and that Project Texas would solve the concerns. But lawmakers weren't buying it. The hearing went viral, ironically, on TikTok itself, and public trust in the platform began to waver. At the same time, other Western nations started to act. The European Union launched a sweeping investigation into TikTok's compliance with data protection laws. The UK issued fines over improper handling of children's data. Canada warned that the app posed an unacceptable level of risk to national security. Australia banned TikTok from all government devices. Across the globe, TikTok was being painted not just as a tech threat, but as a soft power weapon, one capable of influencing public opinion, surveilling populations, and bypassing traditional media structures. Behind the scenes, Silicon Valley giants watched with a mix of anxiety and satisfaction. Facebook and Google, whose user engagement and ad revenue had been steadily chipped away by TikTok, were reportedly lobbying lawmakers and regulators to act more aggressively. Leaked internal memos from Meta, Facebook's parent company, revealed strategies to amplify public fears about TikTok, portraying it as a tool of foreign propaganda. And in some ways, the effort worked. TikTok became a bipartisan punching bag, rare common ground in an otherwise divided political landscape. But beneath the noise, a more complicated reality lingered. For all the public condemnation, no country, not even the United States, had yet taken the final step of a full ban. Why? Because banning TikTok meant alienating a massive population of young voters, creators, and small businesses who had come to rely on the platform. Politicians feared the cultural and economic backlash. The threat was real, but so was the power TikTok had accumulated. It was no longer just an app. It was a cultural superpower, and that made any move against it politically radioactive. TikTok, once an underdog from Beijing, had now become a central player in a global battle over technology influence and the very architecture of the internet. As TikTok's global reputation crumbled under political pressure, a darker and more disturbing narrative began to take shape. One that moved beyond ownership and into the heart of the app's functionality, its algorithm. TikTok's strength had always been its ability to know what users wanted before they did. Its For You page was engineered to hook attention with frightening precision, but how it achieved that began to raise serious questions. Experts warned that TikTok wasn't just reacting to user input, it was manipulating behavior. The app tracked user pauses, replays, rewinds, and even the duration of eye contact with each frame. This allowed the system to learn deeply personal traits, preferences, and vulnerabilities far beyond what users had knowingly provided. And it didn't stop at collecting engagement data. Investigations revealed that TikTok harvested everything from keystroke patterns and contact lists to IP addresses and geolocation even when the app wasn't in use. The Wall Street Journal and cybersecurity researchers at Citizen Lab documented how the app employed techniques often seen in malware device fingerprinting, cross-app tracking, and hidden API calls that circumvented basic privacy protections. ByteDance denied wrongdoing, but the evidence kept stacking up. Then came the scandals. In 2022, it was revealed that ByteDance employees had used TikTok to track the physical locations of journalists investigating the company. The goal was to identify internal leaks. The backlash was immediate and brutal. TikTok confirmed the surveillance had occurred and claimed it was the work of rogue employees who had since been fired. But the damage to its credibility was irreparable. Lawmakers now had proof that TikTok wasn't just a security risk in theory, it had already crossed ethical and legal boundaries in practice. At the same time, another wave of controversy emerged: how TikTok's algorithm shaped mental health and social perception. Former moderators came forward alleging that TikTok's content policies favored beauty filters, thinness, and traditional attractiveness while suppressing content from disabled users or those deemed less marketable. Leaked moderation guidelines even instructed reviewers to minimize visibility of users with abnormal body shapes or ugly facial looks. ByteDance argued that these policies were outdated or misinterpreted, but critics saw a pattern: the app was subtly shaping global standards of desirability culture and identity, all without transparency or accountability. Even more troubling were the app's effects on minors. Multiple studies linked TikTok use to rising anxiety, depression, and eating disorders among teens. The algorithm's design, endless scrolling, unpredictable rewards, and emotionally charged content mirrored addictive slot machine behavior. In courtrooms around the world, grieving parents began filing lawsuits against TikTok, blaming the platform for radicalizing their children or exposing them to harmful trends like blackout challenges, self-harm videos, and suicide glorification. TikTok insisted that it had strict safeguards in place, such as screen time limits and parental controls. But digital watchdogs countered that these measures were poorly enforced and easy to bypass. Internal documents obtained by reporters revealed that TikTok engineers had the power to heat certain videos, manually boosting them into the For You page to make them viral, regardless of algorithmic interest. This meant TikTok had the ability to push content for strategic or political reasons with no clear oversight or transparency. What once looked like a smart entertainment app now resembled something far more sophisticated and far more dangerous. It was no longer just about silly videos or catchy songs. It was about a system that could influence thought, behavior, and culture at scale. Governments had warned about foreign surveillance, but TikTok's real threat may have been closer to home. A mirror that knew too much, manipulated too quietly, and affected too many. As these revelations came to light, it became clear that TikTok wasn't just fighting for its right to exist, it was fighting to prove it could be trusted at all. And for many, that trust was already broken beyond repair. With trust in TikTok shattered and regulators circling from every direction, ByteDance faced a grim ultimatum: evolve or perish. What began as whispers of concern had erupted into legal action, political grandstanding, and an existential threat to the platform's very survival. The company scrambled to launch a series of defensive maneuvers, but each move only deepened the sense of unease. The centerpiece of TikTok's survival strategy was a multi-billion-dollar initiative known as Project Texas, an effort to convince U.S. authorities that American user data could be safely walled off from China. Under this plan, TikTok would store all U.S. data on servers operated by Oracle, a trusted American tech firm, while creating a separate corporate structure with an independent board subject to U.S. oversight. ByteDance insisted this would make TikTok as American as Apple or Google. But critics weren't convinced. Cybersecurity experts noted that while data location mattered, the real issue was who had access to the code and the ability to update the app, both of which still rested with engineers in Beijing. No firewall could stop a line of malicious code once it was approved upstream. Meanwhile, internal documents leaked to the press revealed that ByteDance had delayed implementing the full safeguards of Project Texas, even as it publicly assured lawmakers that the system was already in place. Trust, already fragile, crumbled further. Facing mounting pressure, ByteDance explored more radical options. One proposal was a full divestiture, selling TikTok's U.S. operations to a domestic company. Microsoft, Oracle, and even Walmart were floated as potential buyers. But ByteDance was reluctant to part with its crown jewel, and the Chinese government made clear it wouldn't allow TikTok's core technology, its algorithm, to be sold to a foreign power. This led to a deadlock. ByteDance couldn't sell without Beijing's permission, and it couldn't satisfy American regulators without doing so. The app was caught in a geopolitical tug-of-war, and the clock was ticking. By early 2023, several U.S. states had already banned TikTok on government devices. Then came calls for a nationwide ban. A bipartisan bill, the Restrict Act, gained momentum in Congress, aiming to give the federal government sweeping powers to block foreign-owned apps deemed a national security risk. The bill didn't name TikTok explicitly, but its intent was clear. If passed, it could empower the Commerce Department to kill TikTok in the U.S. with the stroke of a pen. In response, TikTok launched an unprecedented charm offensive. The company poured millions into lobbying hired top-tier law firms and sponsored creators to fly to Washington, D.C. to defend the platform. Influencers testified about how TikTok had changed their lives, built careers, and given them a voice. The campaign was slick, emotional, and highly coordinated, but it may have been too late. The image of TikTok as a fun, apolitical platform had been replaced by a darker picture, a powerful system owned by a foreign adversary designed to collect data-shaped minds and dodge oversight. Even if the app wasn't shut down immediately, its future was anything but secure. Beyond the US, the landscape looked just as bleak. The European Union opened a sweeping investigation into TikTok's compliance with the Digital Services Act. In the UK, new legislation threatened steep penalties for failure to protect children online. Australia joined the chorus of nations restricting the app on government devices. ByteDance tried to spin these developments as misunderstandings promising greater transparency and independent audits. But after years of obfuscation, few believed them. Investors grew nervous. Valuations were quietly slashed. Advertising partners began to hedge their bets, and TikTok, once the golden child of viral media, found itself cornered. The company had two choices: give up control or lose everything. Yet giving up control meant dismantling the very system that made TikTok what it was: its algorithm, its backend, its invisible grip on user behavior. It was like asking Facebook to give up the news feed or Google to abandon search. And so ByteDance hesitated. But hesitation was a gamble. Every week brought new revelations, new lawsuits, new reasons for governments to act. The question was no longer if TikTok would be restructured, but whether it would survive the storm at all. As the walls closed in, one truth became painfully clear. TikTok had built an empire on entertainment, but now it was fighting a war for its right to exist. And empires under siege don't always survive. TikTok's story is no longer just about trending videos or viral fame. It's become a case study in how power, technology, and politics collide in the 21st century. What started as a harmless app turned into a battleground for global influence, forcing governments to confront uncomfortable questions about privacy, sovereignty, and the future of the internet. ByteDance may insist that TikTok is just a business, just a platform for self-expression, but the evidence tells a different story, one filled with shadowy data collection, algorithmic manipulation, and strategic silence. The company has fought to reassure the world, spending billions to build walls and calm fears. But once trust is broken, rebuilding it is another matter entirely. Whether TikTok survives the next wave of legislation or is carved up by political pressure, one thing is clear: the platform has already changed the digital landscape forever. It exposed the vulnerability of open societies in the face of opaque systems and reminded us how quickly entertainment can become entanglement. So the next time you swipe through a video that feels a little too perfect, a little too tailored, ask yourself, who's really pulling the strings? Because maybe, just maybe, TikTok didn't almost go bankrupt because of one decision or one scandal. Maybe it was always playing a dangerous game it was never meant to win.